Listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to True Crime, the podcast that helps you find new, emerging, and undiscovered true crime podcasts. I'm Greg, the host and curator of True Crime. Today's episode is from A Nefarious Nightmare. A Nefarious Nightmare is true crime focused on victim-centered advocacy and raising awareness about crimes against those deemed especially vulnerable. If you like today's episode, make sure to check out the episode description for links to subscribe. All right, let's get this show started.
Begin.
I'm Edward October, and this is A Nefarious Nightmare. This podcast contains foul language and discussions of violence. Additional trigger warnings will be posted as needed in the show notes. Listener discretion is advised.
Back in November of 2018, a group of adult women had a sleepover. There were games, gumbo, and drinks, and everyone was having a fun time. That is, until the next morning.
One of the women in attendance was found to be dead under mysterious circumstances. A quick prayer was said by one of the women in attendance, and then a 911 call is made. This story has been requested by a few listeners, and it is quite a frustrating one, because seriously, someone at the party knows something. So many stories, and then so many stories changing. With that, I'm Amanda Cronin.
And I'm Courtney Fenner, and A Nefarious Nightmare presents Tequila and a Prayer. What really happened to Tamla Horsford?
Before we continue with the story, we want to make you all aware that, as with every case we cover, all parties are presumed innocent until proven guilty by law. We shouldn't have to give that disclaimer, but there it is.
Take that however you may and deduce from this case what you will. We have our own minds made up, and I think after listening to this podcast as a whole, you can probably guess what that is, but please draw your own conclusions. Always keep the victim and their family in your mind when doing so.
Forsyth County, Georgia has a major history of extreme racism, starting around 1912. In 1910, there were just over 10,000 white and 1,000 black people residing in Forsyth County. There are several examples of the history of severe racism, which you will come across in a quick Google search. But one major example is that on September 9th, 1912, a white 18-year-old girl named May Crow was found brutally raped and murdered in a wooded area. The only item that was found by police was a small pocket mirror nearby, and it was assumed to have belonged to a 16-year-old boy by the name of Ernest Knox. Shortly after, he and a few friends were arrested despite there being no link to the crime. One of his friends was a 24-year-old by the name of Rob Edwards. He is important, so remember his name. They did live close by and they were all black, so it's been alleged that they were targeted due to those facts. False confessions have been a topic brought up in many true crime shows and podcasts. And it's been believed that Ernest gave a false confession because he was taunted and threatened by the lead deputy via mock lynching.
All of them were arrested and then held at the county jail. There was quite a bit of public outrage, and an all-white mob then busted in and shot Rob, murdering him. And then they dragged him through the streets right up to the entrance of City Hall, where he was then hanged publicly from a telephone pole as if to send some message. The mob then went door to door, demanding that all black residents leave the county within 24 hours, and then they'd ransacked their homes, killed their livestock, and destroyed everything that they owned. This county stayed primarily white until 1987, when this quote-unquote racial cleansing was highly publicized. Activists and allies protested to remind the county of the heavily racist past, while several white residents retaliated with a so-called peaceful protest in response, holding signs saying things such as, keep Forsyth white and hurled slurs and hate at the black residents. The white residents also threw rocks and other heavy items at them. So today, the county has a population of more than 244,000, and while more than 182,000 are white, only 9,500, or 4%, are black. So it's changed, but not by much.
As a whole, this was known as, quote, racial cleansing that drove 1,100 black residents out of Forsyth County, end quote, according to one of our sources. All of this to say, essentially, it hasn't gotten better. We, as well as many others, agree that this is hugely relevant to the entire story. So, it's important to be aware that while we do not know whether anything had happened to Tamla was racially motivated or not, we do know that there are racist undertones that do take place in the county altogether, as well as in this case, which includes some insensitive and tone-deaf things that were said after she had passed.
Some will argue that because there's a minority that's also highly suspicious in this case, that this can't be a racism issue. I'm here to tell you that this is not at all true. Please remove that from your mind moving forward when listening to this episode. If you're looking at this entire story through that lens, like, saying, oh, they were Latino, so they couldn't have been racist, then your perception of the whole case is skewed, and you probably aren't paying much attention to the bigger picture, which is a black woman died under mysterious circumstances, and the entire case is a clusterfuck from the moment she was seen.
Tamla Horsford, also referred to as Tam, was born October 10th, 1978 in St. Vincent and the Grenadines in the Caribbean. She lived there until she was 12 when she and her family moved to the Bronx in New York. When she was older, she moved to Florida where she met her husband, Leander, also known as Lee, who had a daughter from a previous relationship, and they went on to have 5 sons together. By all accounts, Tam was close with Lee's daughter and made her feel included and accepted her as though she was her own. When Tamla passed away, her youngest son was only 4 years old. Tam had a really close friend by the name of Michelle Graves, who we will bring up later again, very briefly, but she is a huge reason why this case has gotten a lot of attention.
Tamla was known to be a compassionate and selfless person. She was the life of the party. She liked to laugh, to dance, to have fun. Leander had to relocate for work, so the Horsfords picked up and moved to Georgia 5.5 years prior to this whole incident. Tam quickly made friends because she's warm, outgoing, charismatic, and really had this motherly instinct to her. She was heavily involved in her children's extracurriculars. Basically, she was the kind of mom who was there at the football games cheering her kids on, did the whole PTA thing, and also liked to have fun with the adults when the kids went to bed, which that is absolutely fine. Side note, we as parents, we deserve some time to unwind and let loose too, so please don't judge. I mean, parenting isn't our entire personality or anything. Yeah, that's part of it, but I mean, sometimes we just want to chill, man. Anyway, her daughter was pregnant, and she was just thrilled about becoming a grandma. She was simply a free spirit, but also really cared a lot about her kids. She also really enjoyed making friends. It was one of those situations where people could have likely taken advantage of her kindness.
There was a birthday party being celebrated, which was held by the homeowner, John Myers, who was turning 46, and it was planned and organized by Stacy Smith, a friend of Tamla's. Tam knew Jean from a youth football game held that August in which both of their sons were in attendance. The party was supposed to start at 7:30, but Tamla was busy cooking and feeding her family. Prior to even coming to the sleepover, Tam opened up to her husband Lee and said she didn't feel right about going, but didn't want to be rude or inconsiderate. So she went anyways, arriving closer to 9 p.m. This was in Cumming, Georgia, which is located in the center of Forsyth County, about 39 miles northeast from downtown Atlanta, which is one reason we brought up the horrific background on Forsyth in the beginning.
Now, it is important to bring up here that Jean was also dating a pretrial probation officer by the name of Jose Barrera, who worked for the Forsyth County Sheriff's Department. Now, keep this in mind because this does come to play later, but also it's mighty weird that just about every case we cover, and which the result wasn't true justice, has had some heavy link to law enforcement. You know, the good old boys club, if you will. Imagine that. But anyway, Tam hung out with either Stacy or Jean the week previous for another event, so Tam felt comfortable enough and came to the birthday sleepover. They didn't allow men to be there, but, you know, men ended up sticking around, as you're gonna find out.
Tam showed up at this party in this super adorable white onesie with gray paw prints all over it. She had showed up with a big, nice bottle of tequila as a gift for Jean. It's been said that Jean did not appreciate this, which I get it. If you don't drink tequila, you don't drink tequila, do you? But the way she accepted her gift wasn't with a thank you or really any kindness. It was more as if someone removed a dirty diaper and gave it to her. She was extremely stuck up about it and said something to the effect of, quote, "I don't drink tequila, I don't like this, and even you drink it." Stuff like that.
All right, if you haven't watched that show on Netflix called The Watcher, I'm about to give a slight spoiler alert, so you might want to skip ahead about 10 seconds. But to give it an example of how Jean accepted the tequila, you know, Jennifer Coolidge's character, Karen, gave the exact same vibe I'm imagining when her two neighbors ended up showing up with a pie and some brownies in the last episode. I'd imagine that Jean acted the same way.
So after this not so nice exchange, there were points where they all had fun, ate gumbo, watched the LSU game, and also played Cards Against Humanity. At one point, Jose and another man at this quote-unquote no boys allowed adult white woman sleepover did come through for a bite to eat some of the party food and maybe catch glimpses of the game. It was brought up that Jose kept mentioning things like, ugh, women, as if he was a chauvinist. I don't know exactly how relevant to the case that might be, but maybe it is.
All right, sorry guys, another side note. I do remember listening to a podcast back in 2020 where they were pointing out the picture of all of the ladies together, and it was noted that she absolutely was the light in that darkness. You know, when you're in a room full of stuck-up Neiman Marcus customers judging you because you aren't wearing Chanel, but everyone else outside of Neiman Marcus wants to hang out with you because you're fucking awesome and hilarious and beautiful. Sorry, I had a flashback, but it was quite like this. Everyone else seemed, you know, robotic and Stepford wife-like, you know, basic, as if they were tolerating more than having a good time. And I mean, I don't know if that's true, but I definitely saw it and agreed and absolutely sympathized with Tam in that moment.
Yes. Tam seemed to have felt a little left out from what we can see. What's even shittier is that people cracked a few jokes, such as saying that she was a female Bob Marley because she's from the Caribbean, but she stayed connected with Bridget, whom is, well, you'll see. But she would later go on the balcony with Bridget, so Tam shared the tequila with Jean, snubbed with everyone. Jean refused to drink it, but several people took a few shots. Tamla is believed to have had the majority of the bottle, though, because everyone is snubbing her tequila.
So Tamla connects with Bridget, who does say in an interview later that Tamla came on a little too strong. Basically that she was the new girl in this group and that she didn't know her boundaries. And I mean, who could really blame her? I mean, you're kind of in a new town and you're still trying to make friends and everybody gets a little excited at the beginning and that's fine. Even if that's the case anyway, I mean, we don't really know, but it's been theorized but unproven that Bridget may have played some role in this because the scene starts here. Tam and Madeline are caught smoking pot on the balcony. Jean freaks out on them because she said that they were putting Jose's job at risk. I mean, calm down. But anyway, the remainder of the night goes about as well as slumber parties do, with all but 2 women and 1 man staying.
Tamla at one point tried to go home, Her blood alcohol level was beyond the legal limit, and her husband says that she could drink a lot and nobody would know, so that she could handle herself, and he absolutely trusted her to be okay while driving. Bridget steps in and tells her no, that she's had too much to drink, and takes her keys and her phone from her. Now, I respect the fact that she took her keys, but she was practically held hostage. She could have called her husband or someone to pick her up. So all we're saying is, why did Bridget take the phone from her?
Now, it is a good idea to mention that Bridget took Xanax for her anxiety, and later we find out that she'd give her pills to other ladies attending this party. As far as we know, and according to Leander, Tam didn't do drugs except for the occasional weed and alcohol, so keep this in mind. Tam would go out on the balcony with Bridget and she would smoke cigarettes. It's also been mentioned that Tam did smoke, but she was more of a social smoker, which is basically when you smoke while you're drinking, in case you didn't know. The rest of the night is pretty hazy, so people start winding down and going to bed for the night. At this point, it's about 1:30 a.m. It's believed that Tam and Bridget went out one more time so that Tam could have a cigarette before bed, because Jean had an alarm sensor that detected when doors would open or close. And we will mention this more later. And this included the balcony, so sometime between 1:30 a.m. and 1:45 a.m., the balcony door opens.
The next morning, by 8:40 a.m., Madeline wakes up to prepare coffee. As she's doing this, she looks out the window and sees what looks to be a white onesie with gray paw prints. Upon further looking, she notices it's Tamla laying face down, not moving. Hey, Courtney. If you were in Madeline's position and you noticed your friend laying face down in your yard, what would you do?
I would go outside and check on them, call 911.
Well, evidently, the most important thing to do is to get on your knees and pray first, which is what Madeline did. She didn't call 911 or check on Tamla first. She prayed, and I get it. In a scary situation, sometimes you just need prayer or some spiritualism, but I think God or the universe would understand if you called 911 first.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I'm sorry, but if my friend is obviously dead and lying face down outside my window, no offense, God, but you're gonna have to walk and talk with me, you know? I'd be busy checking a pulse with one hand and dialing 911 with the other.
But no, she prayed. And then she walked up to Jean and Jose's room, knocked lightly on the door, and heard water running. She assumed they were taking a shower, so she waited.
Yeah, if you ask me, I'd be urgently busting in there saying, get a towel on, Tamla needs help. Any normal person probably would do that, but Madeline instead peeks out the window, gets a little more urgent, and then goes back and knocks again, a little harder this time, and this time not hearing water running. So she hears Jean and Jose tell her to come on in, so she does, and Madeline's like, your friend from the islands is laying in the backyard. Are you fucking kidding me?
You know, because that's not insensitive at all. And note the passive racism to boot. This is all sarcasm, by the way. They treated Tam like an inconvenience to their day, instead of their friend who may have been dead. So basically, sometime between 8:30 a.m. and 8:45 a.m., Tam is seen like this in the backyard. A 911 call isn't made until 8:59 a.m., a full 15 to 30 minutes later. Suppose she were still breathing. If they had checked on her, they very well could have saved her. Time being wasted. The following is the 911 call that occurred.
Horsford County 911.
Hi, yes, I need an ambulance and a police to my home.
What's the address?
4450 Woodlet Court.
4450 Woodlake?
Woodlet.
Woodlet, okay. Alright, 4450 Woodlet Court. What is your name?
My name is Jean Myers, Jeanne.
Okay, and your phone number is 609?
Yes.
Okay, what's going on?
We had people over last night when we were drinking. Most of us went to bed. One of them stayed on the balcony. She was drinking, and we just went outside, and she's laying face down in the backyard. It looks like I'm guessing maybe she fell off the balcony, but she's stiff.
Okay, is she breathing?
I don't know if she's face down.
Okay, how old is she?
41. Here, hold on.
Hey, this is Jose Barrera.
Hey, have y'all checked to see if she's breathing?
She's not moving one bit. She's not breathing.
Okay.
I just tried to assess her, touch her. She's completely face down in the yard. She is stiff.
Okay. Do you know if she, do you see any blood or anything where she... Are you there?
I am.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was outside.
It's okay. I'm not sure what happened to the line there for a second. Do you see any blood or anything to where, from where she fell?
I don't know if I should move her over. I mean, she is completely face down.
Okay. I mean, can you just check and see if she's breathing? If she's not breathing and you know she's gone, then just leave her where she's at. If she... Okay.
1 minute.
Right here is a few seconds of silence that occurred within the call. You hear some very faint clicking, but it's believed here is where they might have muted the phone call so that way the operator didn't hear what they were saying.
I'm completely not sure.
Okay, and that's the only blood that you would see?
That's what I can see without moving her over. I haven't seen her face.
Do you know if she was suicidal at all?
I have no clue. I've met her one other time. You know, like my girlfriend said, we were over last night. It was her birthday party. We're not the woman that we believe to be deceased, but it's my girlfriend's birthday party. Instead of having everybody go out, she had everyone stay in. And she was the last one I saw before everybody was typically put off to bed. And she was the last one in the kitchen. She was just either waiting around for a ride or waiting until the morning.
Okay. How far is the, where she would have fell from, how far is the deck from the ground?
I would probably say maybe 20 feet.
Okay.
You know, 20 feet from where your feet would be on the railing. The railing itself is maybe 3.5, 4 feet.
Okay. And what is her name?
I know her name, we call her Tam. I'm assuming that's short for Tammy or Tamra.
Was she there with anyone else?
Her name is Tam Horsford, Horsford, so the black female. I don't believe anybody was. My girlfriend has cameras here on the back deck that we can check.
Okay.
That I think would have caught the incident if she fell from here. Again, I don't know. It's hard to say if she fell from the deck or if she was already downstairs. She was the only smoker here, and I'm sorry. That's a lot of information.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that. So you think she's possibly out there smoking?
Yeah, she was the only smoker. I mean, I'm on the back deck right now, and you know, cigarettes, lighter, that type of thing are out here.
Okay.
I'm just trying to see where on her wrist kind of came from.
Okay. All right. Are all the people that were there last night, are they still at your house?
Okay. Okay, there are 4 people that were here last night that are no longer here.
Okay. And they just left this morning, or they leave last night?
Do you know roughly what time each of them left? Like, they completely don't know how to fit in. We can check. She's got an alarm system that gives alerts when the doors are open on her phone.
Okay.
But I think the last time that I personally saw Tam was probably about 1 in the morning before I'd gone upstairs to bed.
Okay.
And at that point, she was the only one in the kitchen. I know.
Okay. Let me see where everybody is. I have one deputy that's about to pull into your subdivision. So I'll stay on the phone with you just for a minute. Is this going to be around back? Is that the way he needs to go?
Right. So when he pulls up to the residence, there will be one car in the street, 4 in the front.
And does he need to come and go through the house, or does he need to walk around the back?
They can go around to the side. I'm going to grab my shoes, and then I'll direct them when I get here. It'll be easier for them because she's laying in the yard down, basically on the patio downstairs.
Okay. All right, I have one that should be pulling up. Do you see him outside?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll let you go then.
All right, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Bye.
All right, well, full disclosure, guys, I was the one that researched this case, and it just enraged me. So I've known about it for a while, and it's just, it gets worse, guys. So the way that Jose and Jean both were acting so flippant about the thing is just strange, yes? The 911 call in full was about 7 minutes long. There were parts that were complete silence, as if they were muting themselves from being heard by the operator. It was as though they didn't want the operator to hear them saying something. At 9:07 a.m., ambulance arrived and she was pronounced dead on the scene. A medical examiner's report concluded that Tamla had sustained severe injuries of the head, neck, and torso, along with a laceration on the right ventricle of her heart, hemorrhages of the scalp, and a dislocated right wrist. She had also several abrasions on her face, hands, and her legs.
A toxicology report indicated that Tamla's blood level concentrated was 3 times the legal limit at 0.238. Despite this, many attendees say that she seemed fine and didn't appear to be overly drunk, which aligns with what Lee had said about her handling her liquor. She also had a small amount of THC. She did smoke weed the night before and Xanax in her system. I know what you're thinking. Wait, Xanax? Like what Bridget takes for anxiety? Yes, friends, that Xanax. The report concluded that the Xanax hadn't metabolized in Tamla's liver just yet, which meant it had been digested pretty much right before her death. How odd. Tamla did not have a prescription for Xanax, and neither did her husband. Bridget, however, did.
Bridget Fuller. You see, she has anxiety. Nobody else has anxiety but Bridget, right? And that's why she didn't stay the night, she says. And she's weird with people. She gets vibes, you know? There's a full interview with her, and I'm going to attach that to the show notes, but you have to hear it because she's just wackadoo. But it's basically 30 minutes of her answering questions, but instead of answering the questions she's being asked in the interview, she's answering questions in another dimension. I know I'm weird with my comparisons, but for example, if someone would ask her if she enjoyed that show, The Handmaid's Tale, she'd probably respond with like, sucks. You know, it makes no sense. So it's weird. And at one point she says that she considers herself to be the mother hen of this group, said that everyone went to bed around 1:15 to 1:30 a.m. except for Tamla, who ate gumbo in the kitchen. She and Tam chatted, and then Tam said that she was going to go have a cigarette, and then she was going to go to bed when she was done eating.
Bridget allegedly carried Xanax in a necklace, but denied giving anyone, including Tam, anything that night. Stacy Smith also denied receiving Xanax from Bridget that night, but we find out later that this is a lie. After detectives found a text on Stacy's phone in which she asked Bridget for more, quote-unquote, medicine. She said that it had helped her that morning, which is the morning Tamla was found dead. Jean had an alarm system installed in her home which recorded every time the door opened. The front door, the back door, and the garage was opened and closed via automatic text sent to her cell phone. We mentioned this earlier. Alerts at 1:47 a.m. were consistent with Bridget's story that her husband picked her up around 1:45 a.m. So, Bridget was one of the people who left the party. What's strange is that exactly 10 minutes later, there's an alert for a back door opening at 1:57 a.m. She very likely went to go smoke, but the door never closed.
Jean and Jose claim that Tamla was found completely face down with her arms straight down by her side, palms were facing up, which is actually a bizarre position to land in from a fall. If you're falling from somewhere, you will naturally brace yourself. You're not going to just fall flat. That's not how human mechanics work. Plus, you would have a broken nose and possibly broken teeth if this were actually the case. On the contrary, police documents said that she was found with her head to the side and one elbow bent and extended away from her body, as she had braced herself. Jose told detectives that he found a cigarette and a lighter on the deck, and he said that he moved them because of his quote-unquote OCD, which I'm not going to go on a tangent. I really want to, but we really need to stop using mental health terms as willy-nilly excuses for everything. Also the fact that they were, quote, in his path. They were not tested for DNA, and they were 2 brands of cigarettes, not one. And it's been argued that smokers typically have that one brand that they just stick to, and I happen to know that that is mostly true. Tamla likely stuck to one brand. Before the day was over, detectives had concluded that Tamla fell off of the 2nd-story deck while smoking a cigarette. The deck was 14 feet and 10.5 inches high, yet she didn't sustain any broken facial bones or teeth. Odd.
By now, you're all angry because of the passive racism and the nonchalant in her death, the snobbery. But just wait. In an interview that took place 5 days later at Jean's home, she gifted detectives Dunkin' Donuts, gift cards, and homemade cookies. She then asked, quote, "Do you need me or can I go upstairs and get ready for this funeral?" End quote. Y'all, she said this funeral. Not Tam's funeral, not my friend's funeral. It was this funeral. Note each time that Jean speaks about Tamla in the audio recorded police interviews, she never refers to her friend of 3 months by her name. Instead, she refers to Tamla as this woman and to her body as it or that. And as for good old Jose, he refused a polygraph test. And I get that they can be inconclusive, but prove your innocence, dummy. He also refused to hand his phone in as evidence without a search warrant. At first, he claimed it was a new phone. A second later, he had already, quote-unquote, deleted everything from that day. Just, wow.
In February of 2019, Jose was fired after he was found accessing confidential files regarding Tamla's case. He said he wanted to know whether it had been closed. Jose admitted abusing his privilege and blamed his actions on quote-unquote stupid curiosity. Soon after, Forsyth Deputy Mike Christian, who was one of the lead detectives on this case, resigned after he was caught leaking confidential information to a woman he was having an affair with. Good old boys club, I tell ya. In that same month, Tamla's cause of death came back as, quote, multiple blunt force injuries, end quote. Her death was ruled accidental and the case was closed. Leander is one of many that believe that she had been murdered. He said it didn't make sense that she fell over the railing because he had seen her, quote, drink half a bottle of tequila and salsa in 5-inch heels, and that she knew how to handle her liquor. He also claimed deputies showed no compassion when they informed him what happened. In an interview, for example, the way it had gone down was they would say to him, "Are you Lee?" And he would say, "What is this regarding?" And they would be like, "Are you Lee?" He'd be like, "Again, what is this regarding?" And they were like, "Are you Lee?" Like, they were just really rude. And he was like, "As a matter of fact, my name is Leander, but what is this regarding?" And they just basically blew this off as some kind of like, "Oh, you know, your wife has passed away." Like, how would you be like that when you tell a family member, you know, that their spouse or their family member had passed away? Like, you just have to have the compassion, you know? But unfortunately, they did not have that compassion, as, again, they had to ask him 3 times and he was asking what it was regarding before they finally said what had happened. They then insisted that her death had been an accident before the autopsy had even been completed, which is, wow.
Michelle Graves, Tamla's close friend, also doesn't believe her death was an accident. She said she was actually threatened by Jean and Jose after she voiced her opinion online that they might have something to do with Tamla's death. Her file was illegally accessed by Jose before he was fired. They also threatened to sue her for slander many times. During the BLM movement in 2020, her case made headlines and was reopened. In June of 2020, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation reopened Tamla's case. Again, it was concluded that no foul play was indicated. Meanwhile, attorney Ralph Fernandez, who was hired by the Horsford family, wrote in a letter addressed to Leander that he believed her death was a homicide.
Ralph Fernandez based his findings on these facts: conflicting witness statements, a tampered crime scene, mishandled evidence, and an quote-unquote unheard absence of autopsy photos. No rape kit was performed on Tamla's body, nor were clippings of her fingernails collected, nothing like that. After GBI closed the case for a second time, the Horsford family ordered an independent autopsy conducted by medical examiner Dr. Adel Shaker, who wrote, quote, "I know this was a homicide. The problem is I can't pin it on anybody because I don't have a badge," end quote. Dr. Shaker's findings were published to the media on May 13th of this year, 2022. In his report, he lists the same cause of death, multiple blunt force injuries, however, and he goes on to write that the quote-unquote dislocated wrist Tamla had sustained was actually a compound fracture and that the bone was sticking out of her wrist. Again, this is where she likely braced herself for the fall, and this is the same compound fracture that Jose said was a suicidal cut. Dr. Shaker continued on saying that the injury should have resulted in a large amount of blood loss, but the only blood found at the scene were a few drops on Tamla's sleeve on the opposite side of her injury. Chillingly, she also claims that a cut found on her wrist was sustained after she was already dead.
As of now, aside from new documents being found to ruin the credibility of the police officers on her case, Tamla's case is still closed and ruled accidental. A petition calling for the FBI to reinvestigate her death can be found in our episode show notes. Holy shit, that was wild.
Right? Oh my gosh, I've heard this story from so many different podcasters in the past, and thankfully they all got it spot on, but also, I mean, it just doesn't make it any less infuriating. The good news, though, is that all of this awareness is being raised on it, you know?
I'm kind of sad that they haven't done like an investigation on HLN or something, but I do believe this case needs way more awareness. It's so good that many people are more aware, but we have to keep raising that awareness. Tamla's family and friends have demanded it, and we must help.
If you want to be instrumental in making any change, please find our links in the show notes. Tamla was a divine bee, full of life, light, and love, and she was taken from us way too soon. She has left behind 5 handsome sons and 1 beautiful daughter and her husband Leander. As Tamla is a bee, so is her family. They are all a hive. Bees are strong, resilient, yet vulnerable, much like Tamla. We have to protect the bees at all costs. That means even signing petitions for this case. They are necessary for life, and without bees, we all die off. So be vigilant, for when you mess with the bees,
you get the hive.
Thank you for listening to A Nefarious Nightmare. Original intro music by Ghost Stories Incorporated. Remixed by Ryan RCX Murphy. Additional music provided by Epidemic Sound. This podcast was researched, scripted, and produced by Amanda Cronin and Courtney Finner. A Nefarious Nightmare is a Cloud 10 iHeart podcast. Managed by A Nefarious Nightmare, Sim Sarna, and Jamie Rice of Murderish and Dirty Money Moves. Thank you again for listening, and be vigilant.
Thanks again for listening to True Crime by Indie Drop-In Network. If you would like to nominate a true crime podcast to be featured, just send me a tweet at Indie Drop-In. I'd also love to hear if one of our featured podcasts is now your favorite show. Indie Drop-In survives off ad revenue and listener donations. If you would like to contribute, please consider buying me a coffee. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/Indie Drop-In. If you look at the very bottom of the episode description, I put a link in there to make it really easy. Indie Drop-In has many other shows that you also might like. Just go to indiedropin.com. All right, see you next week.